Alright, all you glorious gamers out there, welcome to the PlayersToo Podcast, the video game podcast for gamers like you, by gamers like you. You can find PlayersToo on all the social media, that is Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, the lot. You can also find our written content over at PlayersToo.com, that's PLAYERSTOO.com. And if you could take 5 seconds to give us 5 stars over on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts, that really helps us out. It does a huge amount for the exposure to the show. And while you're over there, if you could leave us a little review as well, again, that just helps us out even more. And thank you so much to anyone that's already done that for us. You're an absolute legend to us. Alright, and on with the show. My name is Mark Henderson. With me, as always, Mr. Lewis Camley. How's it going, Lewis?
Going very well, Mark. How are you getting on? It's been a wee while.
It has. We missed last week because my house flooded, which super fucking sucked. Really sucked. That was not good. That was a whole thing that we're still dealing with. But we're back this week, Lewis. Lewis, I want to blow past that. I want to forget that ever fucking happened.
Well, I'm going to ask you about it later.
Talk about some video games. You can ask me all you want later, but not right now. What have you been playing, Lewis?
Well, Mark, since we last spoke, I have rolled credits on Final Fantasy VII Remake.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, just the other night I finished it off. I actually thought I would have finished it much quicker, but in the week that we didn't record, I had way less time than I was expecting to have for playing it.
Yeah, me too. You'll see that on my Witcher update in a minute.
I don't think I have quite the excuse that you have, right enough. But yeah, I finished it the other day. Really enjoyed the kind of ending. Like, it just went absolutely mad for the last few hours, both in terms of the story, which I'll maybe circle back to in a second, but the actual gameplay, I mean, it just became a sort of epic boss rush at the end, where it's sort of back-to-back major encounters, including one that I thought was really smart to drop in, where you play just as Barrett and Aerith against this like Arsenal tank thing, and it was the first time in the whole game where I didn't essentially rely on Cloud for most of the action, you know. And I kind of wish that there had been a wee bit more of that. Actually, I think that that's something that they could have done.
I agree. Yeah,
like just all the additional stuff, all the side missions, and the way that the original game's story was expanded for this, I thought overall didn't add a great deal for me. And if they had done it more like that, like you go and play some missions as Jesse, Biggs and Wedge, for example, or you do some stuff just as Barrett and Tifa or whatever, might have been more interesting than what they did do with a lot of this, because I felt like this was kind of bloated, and that most of the stuff that I enjoyed about it was all in the original game by and large, but those bits were great, and like I still love the story. I like what they did with it here. I think that the mad changes at the end of the game, which effectively seem to set it up to go in any direction that they want to take it from here on in, as opposed to, you know, what the original game actually did. That's cool, and that's really interesting, and it's a smart way to do a remake. But overall, I'm quite mixed on it. I think if I was rating it on a scale, I would probably give it like an 8, because it's, I think, visually and sonically really impressive. And I did think that I don't often sort of notice video game music the way that a lot of people do, but by the end of that game I was really gripped by that side of things, and I enjoyed it fine, but I just, no part of it made me absolutely wowed, you know. I just enjoyed my experience with it fine, kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, man, I think that we probably aren't a million miles away on it. Like, if I were to rate it, I would probably give it between an 8 and an 8.5. Honestly, like I would be in that range as well. I just think that I have a strong nostalgia factor for it that you just don't. You know what I mean? And I probably... Is it fair to say that I probably enjoy that style of gameplay and that style of combat more than you in general as well?
I would say absolutely, yeah. I mean, yeah, I don't play a lot of this type of game, and that was what I was just about to say there, actually, was like, I can totally see why people who do have that investment in it, or in, you know, in the series more generally, but specifically that game, will take a lot more from it, partly because it gives you a lot more, right? There are characters introduced here that I don't know anything about because they weren't in the Midgar section of the original, which is all I've played, so... Anyway, yeah, that's where I've finished it up. I still intend on playing the Yuffie DLC, but I don't know if I'm going to do it right away, just because I kind of want to play some other stuff. I am mindful, though, that if I don't play it now, the likelihood of going back to play it diminishes quite a bit, so we'll see.
Significantly, I would say. Is it long? I can't remember how long it was. I don't remember it being overly long.
I've seen, I think if you just mainline it, it's about 45 hours, but there's up to about 20 hours of content, yeah.
That's the sort of vibe I got. Like, I spent a lot of time farting around playing like wee mini games and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Just because I quite enjoyed it, which obviously I know for a fact you wouldn't do. But yeah, I really enjoyed the Yuffie sections, and I enjoyed playing as Yuffie as well. Like Yuffie was a really good character to be as well. I would recommend that, and if you can be bothered playing it, then you should.
Well, again, if getting another character might be the thing that tempts me in, and I don't know, maybe by the time if Reunion does come this year and all the hype kicks up again, if I haven't played it by then, maybe that's when I would drop in just to kind of keep the momentum up. So yeah, it's just a couple of other quick things to mention. One, I've been watching The Last of Us on the new HBO adaptation, which has been really great so far, but maybe we can just talk about that when it's finished, essentially.
Well, I've not watched it yet.
Well, exactly, yeah. You might not have. So it's been really good so far. I highly recommend it for fans of the game. And more importantly, I have bought an Xbox Series X at long last, and I have finally, for the first time in my life, entered the green side.
Very good. That was also a football reference for everyone here. Enjoying it?
I've barely touched it, to be totally honest. I bought one. I bought it just like last weekend, kind of on a whim, on second hand, but barely played. I just thought I'm going to spend a wee bit of cash and get this in, but I don't need it to be brand new out the box. And so far it's been exactly what I was expecting it to be. It's been my Game Pass machine. I've streamed a wee bit just to make sure everything was working okay. Played a wee bit of Forza Horizon 4, and did donuts outside of my old office in Edinburgh, which was quite good fun. and then I have been playing our PlayAlong game for January, Norco, which is on Game Pass. I've been playing that just yesterday. I put some hours into that. So very limited experience so far. The UI sucks big time. It is completely all over the place. I don't know what I'm looking at.
I am not a huge fan of the UI. I think historically Xbox UI hasn't been brilliant, I would say. It's just like to be honest with you, I'm not a huge fan of the PS5 UI either, but it's just a lot cleaner than the Xbox One, and I feel it's overly complex.
Yeah, so maybe I'll learn it over the months ahead, but that's me. What have you been playing in the last few weeks then?
Well, as I alluded to, I am still playing The Witcher 3 because, as I said the last time, which would have been 2 weeks ago since we spoke about this list, I was basically at the end of the mainline game, and I still am. I have played all of the Heart of Stone DLC. I then sort of read into what order I should be doing things in, because there's the Blood and Wine DLC as well, and it was basically recommended to finish the mainline game, then go back and do Blood and Wine. So that's what I'm going to do. And so I've just finished Heart of Stone, which was the first DLC. Now I'm going to finish the actual main game, which is just like a couple of missions. Then I'm going to start in earnest Blood and Wine, because I did briefly start it. And what I did not realise, Lewis, is that it's a whole other fucking map. There is so much more in Blood and Wine than I thought. Like, I thought it was just going to be like Heart of Stone again, where it was just like a new set of missions within the worlds that you already know.
Yeah.
But it actually sort of dawned on me that, see, right at the beginning of the game, when I was just sort of like scoping out the map and seeing what was what, there was a wee section like further down than all the rest of them that was like, oh, enter here at like level 35, and I was like, and this is like quite genuinely might have been between 60 and 70 hours of gameplay ago. I was like, all right, I can worry about that at the time, and then never thought about it again since. But that is where this DLC is set. That is where this DLC is set, and it's a whole other fucking map. It's a whole other map with all new side missions and like Witcher contracts, and it's just a whole other section to do. And I was like, oh my god, this is at one time amazing and terrifying, because I'm definitely going to play it, because I've been enjoying playing it so fucking much. But it's just daunting that I'm like, man, that's at least another 20 hours. Like, right there, that's got to be at least another 20 hours. So, yeah. But honestly, I have enjoyed this game so much more than I was expecting to. It, to all intents and purposes, could have came out last week, let alone, God, nearly more than 10 years ago. I don't even know when it first came out.
It was like 2015, I think. So, yeah, approaching 10 years. But
a long time ago. And it just plays fantastically. Everything about it is great. The quality of the side missions, the story and everything in it is just fantastic. And what I would say is that this is the first game from CDPR that a lot of people will have played. However, this is actually the second game from CDPR that I'll have played. The first game I played was Cyberpunk, which was a very, very different experience indeed. And what I would say is that it's just so staggering to me that the people that made this game also made Cyberpunk, because just none of the energy and the the joy of playing this game was in Cyberpunk. Do you know what I mean? And on paper, Cyberpunk was set in a cyberpunk world. It was all to do with like futuristic robots and stuff like that. It was a FPS. Like on paper, I should like that way more than The Witcher. Like that was so much more my jam, and it was just not even close at all. Yeah, they really missed the boat with that game, to be completely honest with you. And I know that they've sort of turned it around a little bit, and they've got this new DLC coming out soon or whatever, and everyone's sort of like changed their tune on it a little bit. But like fundamentally, I think that Cyberpunk is closer to like an FPS. Like I think this open world is closer to an FPS Assassin's Creed sort of formula than it is actually to The Witcher. Like I think that it's almost fallen into the path of what everyone else was doing, because they all tried to copy The Witcher, right?
Yeah.
And then they are almost like copying themselves. They're sort of trying to reinvent that in a different setting, and they just never did it. And no one's really done it so far as I can tell, because this is just on a completely different fucking level. And I don't know if it is because it came from like a series of books and stuff like that, and the world and the lore's still there. We're also coming into this series, you and I anyway, and a lot of people came into this series in the third game. Do you know what I mean? Where there's already a lot has happened. There's a lot of story and background that's already taken place. Do you know what I mean? I don't know what it was, but just none of what is good about The Witcher to me was captured in Cyberpunk at all. Like none of it, absolutely none of it. I'm enjoying Witcher magnitudes more. It is a totally different experience, to the point that I basically can't believe the same set of people made these two games.
Well, yeah, really glad to hear you're still enjoying it this much. It's great just to know that you've dipped into something that you weren't expecting this from, and it's massively over-delivered. So yeah, good stuff. You'll be talking about it for a week still.
Yeah, my expectations for this game were so low. Like I was basically being like, this will be good, I'll like kick through the main story and stuff like that, it'll be fine. And even when it started out, I was like, I'm not really sure that I'm vibing with this and whatever. But then the more I played, the more I was just like, oh, this is like truly brilliant. Like it's very rare that games that are this old that you go back and play really live up to the hype, and this just has by so much it has lived up to the hype. Anyway, enough of me gushing over The Witcher again, Lewis. It's time for the news. All right, Lewis, news item number 1. And just so everyone knows, going in here, we're going to do a shortened news section. Then we're going to dive into the Xbox Developer Direct, which just happened a few moments ago before we started recording this. But Lewis, news item number 1. Some very bad news. Microsoft have laid off 10,000 employees, with its gaming divisions being hit pretty hard, it looks like. It seems that 343, the Coalition, Bethesda Game Studios, and their HoloLens team as well have all been hit quite badly by these layoffs. Particularly 343 seems to have been hit the hardest. This was also announced a year to the day since Xbox announced that they were buying Activision for $69 billion. And assuming that my sums are correct, just so everyone knows, that $69 billion could have been used to pay those 10,000 employees $100,000 a year for the next 69 years. There's a good capitalism there for you, Lewis. Phil Spencer has said this regarding the layoffs.
This has been a difficult week across Microsoft and here inside our teams. Now that many of the one-to-one and team conversations have happened, I want to take a moment to reiterate the message that you heard from your leaders. This is a challenging moment in our business, and this week's actions were painful choices. The gaming leadership team had to make decisions that we felt set us up for the long-term success of our products and business, but the individual results of those decisions are real. I know that hurts. Thank you for supporting our colleagues as they process these changes. Over the coming weeks, we will have many opportunities to connect and answer your questions, including the monthly gaming update next week for teams who attend that meeting, and I'm in close contact with teams at ZeniMax to provide support. The GLT and I are committed to being as transparent as we can. Moving forward with ambiguity is challenging, but I'm confident that together we will get through this difficult moment in time. Xbox has a long history of success thanks to the work you do in service of players, creators and each other. Your work is so deeply appreciated and valued in these times of change and is integral to our business momentum. I'm confident in our future and proud to be part of this team, but also conscious that this is a challenging time, and I want to thank you for everything you do here. Phil.
And just a few days after that, during an earnings call, Microsoft confirmed that Xbox's content and service revenue was down at 12% year on year for the quarter ending December 22, and their hardware revenue was down 13% year on year over the same period. This was basically blamed on a lack of first party games because Xbox didn't release any, and a lower monetization on third-party content. But this was partially offset by the growth in Xbox Game Pass subscriptions, which Xbox also announced had hit a all-time high with a record 120 million monthly active users over the same period. So while Xbox Game Pass continues to grow and seemingly more and more people continue to use it, Xbox is actually still down quite a lot this year on the previous year, which really tells me that Game Pass isn't very profitable for them at all at the moment, which means to me, again, long term, that Game Pass is probably, in its current state, unsustainable at the price point that it's currently at. But Lewis, what do you think of all this, of the layoffs, of the sort of financial situation around Xbox? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, really bad news, as you said at the top there. Feel for all the people that have been laid off. Important to mention, that this is across all of Microsoft. It's not just the gaming division, and also people will probably be aware it's part of like a much wider trend right now in the tech industry where people are being slashed at all the major companies. I think Google lost this.
Amazon and Google, huge layoffs as well recently.
Google was another 12,000 or something, I think, and obviously Twitter has been going through that as well for slightly different reasons. And it's an interesting time right now. What I can't grasp is why, in Phil's statement here, he says, this is a particularly challenging moment for our industry. And it doesn't really feel like it is a massively it's a challenging moment for everyone right now. Obviously, the global economy is not in great health. But the video game industry has been booming for the last few years. And as you say, Microsoft are quite up for throwing a lot of cash around. And so it's hard to see why they have found that 10,000 people need to be cut, including from studios who are still working, like the Coalition. They're supposed to be working on a major game just now, and they've I don't know, some of the decision making there is the same thing again. To buy up Bethesda and then lay off some of their staff seems like an odd thing to have done, and you could see why that might have happened if Bethesda had released something that had flopped, but they haven't. So I can't really join the dots. I mean, obviously, again, if you're Phil Spencer and the top bosses at Microsoft come to your door and say, we need to make this amount of saving and some of it's coming from your division, there's not much he can do. I mean,
and to be clear, I strongly suspect that probably is what happened.
Yeah, almost certainly. I mean, I don't imagine he'd be going about cutting for no good reason, and they know that they need to. The even madder thing here is that Xbox know they need to get games out, so to start cutting gaming staff is a tricky thing. Obviously, 343, I think we're looking at a much deeper problem there. Halo Infinite just never really delivered, and so they might be kind of feeling the heat on that. But I don't know, it's a horrible picture, and I don't really see. I mean, this is also against the backdrop of huge layoffs in games media as well, across multiple outlets, including like major newspapers that have established gaming verticals. So
the Washington Post, I think, literally,
I think yesterday,
like basically gutted their whole gaming division,
just deleted it, and that's happened in a few places recently. So there's something odd going on across the industry, and those will be completely different issues for sure. Like what's happening in the tech sector is obviously a different issue, but it doesn't feel like we're heading towards a particularly great place. And this is the other thing with consolidation, right? We've been saying this the whole time. When you consolidate, it becomes easier to remove jobs because you've already got people doing some of those jobs. So presumably some of those people that were laid off from the likes of Bethesda maybe found that someone else in Xbox was already sort of doing their job, and they will now be doing that job for more studios, basically. And that's what can happen when these huge companies buy up too many other companies,
Yeah, and I think for this to come a year to the day since they announced that they were buying Activision was just a extremely bad look when all these people are like, well, I don't have a job. If I'm in America and my healthcare is tied to my employment and stuff like that, maybe I don't have healthcare now as well. Do you know what I mean? This can be devastating to people. Like, we're very fortunate that we live in a country where our employment is like quite highly protected, but that is just not the case in a lot of other situations, and this can be very, very bad for people and people's like entire lives. You know what I mean? Not even just their monetary income, and now as well that we're obviously hearing that Xbox are continuing to spend even more money on that deal, will definitely seem to be looking to go to court with the FTC to fight for this $69 billion deal to go through, pay even more money while you're laying off staff. I mean, in fact, I think I just read the other day as well that they've now subpoenaed Sony to appear in court for this lawsuit that the FTC have filed against them. So it looks as if that's definitely happening, and Xbox is definitely willing to put in the time and the effort and the money to make sure that this deal goes through. But yeah, it's not a good look. It's a very, very bad situation. It's very bad for the people who have all been laid off. I really, really feel for them, because in the video games industry, often you have to uproot your entire life and move to California to actually even fucking get a job in the first place, just to not have it anymore. Yeah, it's bad. It's very, very bad. All right, Lewis. News item number 2, and the misery train continues. More bad news comes out of Ubisoft. Following weaker than expected software sales over the holiday season and delaying Skull and Bones again, they have slashed their revenue forecast for the current financial year. They have also apparently cancelled 3 unannounced games and also plan to cut €200 million worth of costs over the next 2 years. Quotes, through targeted restructuring, divesting some non-core assets, and usual natural attrition, all of which sounds like people will be losing their jobs, Lewis. CEO Yves Guillemot has also made things much worse by sending an email to all Ubisoft employees implying that it was somehow their responsibility and their job to fix the current situation. The email in part read like this:
"Today, more than ever, I need your full energy and commitment to ensure we get back on the path to success. I'm also asking that each of you be especially careful and strategic with your spending and initiatives to ensure we're being as efficient and lean as possible. The ball is in your court to deliver this lineup on time and at the expected level of quality and show everyone what we're capable of achieving."
Yeah, and it was this "the ball is in your court" line that I think really rubbed people the wrong way. Do you know what I mean? This was obviously received extremely badly by the employees, so much so that the French trade union Solidaris Informatique urged Ubisoft Paris staff to strike. They have released this statement regarding industrial action.
According to Guillemot, the ball is in our court, but the money stays in his pocket. In his latest statement, Mr. Guillemot announces a worrying future for Ubisoft. If the request to employees to be especially careful and strategic with your spending is ironic, considering the company's editorial strategy of the last few years, it is not funny. When Mr. Guillemot speaks of attrition and organisational adjustments, it means staff reductions, discrete studios closures, salary cuts, disguised layoffs, etc. On several occasions, Mr. Guillemot is trying to shift the blame once again onto the employees. He expects us to be mobilised, to give it our all, to be as efficient and lean as possible. These words mean something: overtime, managerial pressure, burnout, etc. Mr. Guillemot asks a lot from his employees, but without any compensation.
They are now calling for a 10% uplift in all staff salary to compensate for inflation, and they are asking for improved working conditions as well, including the introduction of a 4-day week. So he really seems to have fucked off the unions here, Liz. And to be honest with you, I agree with everything that they said in that statement. I think that his words mean all of those things in reality. Guillemot has now apologised to staff in a Q&A session. However, this industrial action was apparently not addressed during that session. Lewis, Ubisoft are a fucking mess, are they not?
Yeah, they are a mess. It does look bad over there just now. They're struggling, as we could tell from the poor financial results from last year, and they're panicking, and that's what I think comes across.
That's just a story that just keeps on going. Like, every time we get reports from one of these financial calls, they are always reporting that they have missed their targets, they're underperforming, games aren't doing well. I mean, see, to be honest with you, see if you've got Mario IP and you can't get a Mario IP hitting your fucking sales target, either your targets were nonsense or you're fundamentally doing something wrong.
Exactly, and particularly when their own analysis of why that had happened and why all their slate hadn't performed, they said gamers are flocking towards massive IP, massive established IP. Well, I mean, that was a Mario game, a Nintendo game, a Mario game, and a Ubisoft game all put in together. Those are massive IPs. So.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. It was Mario and Rayman, and they also have Far Cry and Assassin's Creed. It's like, you own some of the biggest IP in video games. What are you talking about?
They've just, they've just really struggled to evolve past their sort of peak of, I don't know, popularity that they had maybe early 2010s when, the Assassin's Creed games were absolutely killing it and they were bringing out loads of other things and being experimental. It's all gone a bit wrong since then, and they're really struggling to get back on course. And I do think again and again it comes from the leadership. This is a company that has been beset by allegations of all sorts of dodgy behaviours, workplace shenanigans that shouldn't be happening.
Oh yeah, I think it's quite clear that this is a toxic environment here as well. Like, from all reports, it is a bad place to work, particularly if you're a woman.
Yeah, well, exactly. And there's no smoke here without fire, so there's obviously some bad apples here, whether it's right at the top or whatever. But here we have the lead of the company saying this stuff out loud. I mean, his statement feels very much like a letter to the investors, but addressed to the staff. It's basically him saying, yeah, we're going to find ways to shore up the bottom line, and we're going to push all the blame on it and all the expectation onto the staff. Maybe it was intended to G everyone up, but it really massively backfired. And you don't want to piss off the unions in France. They're completely off the chain. They're rioting in France right now over something like pretty minuscule, really, about pensions. I don't know the ins and outs of it. It might not be super minuscule, but the unions in France are wild. So for him to have kicked the hornet's nest here with a fucking really stupid comment, it's just another sign that the guy doesn't massively know how to lead a company.
No, that's it. Like, I mean, I don't know much about Yves Guillemot. I have to admit that, right? But I think he is massively landed on his feet when they hit out with Assassin's Creed, basically, and when they got the Rainbow Six, the Tom Clancy, name, and they really built their company on the back of that. But subsequently, they have done absolutely nothing with those games in so long, and it's just reiterated boring fucking games, frankly, that are just uninteresting and doing nothing new, and they've been living off the back of that for a long time. And quite frankly, I think time and time again this man has frankly proven himself a clown and doesn't know what he's doing. Do you know what I mean? And I think that if I was an investor in Ubisoft, I would be like, get this guy out in his fucking ass. Like, we need someone in here who knows what they're doing. Do you know what I mean? And sort of swinging it back around to acquisitions and stuff like that. Honestly, I think that if Xbox hadn't already bought Activision, they would have bought Ubisoft now. Like, I think that they would actively have bought them by this point. Well, hadn't they had all this capital tied up in Activision, they would have bought Ubisoft instead, because they are ripe for the picking right now. Like, I don't know what their stock value is, but it must be a fraction of what it was, as you said.
Absolutely,
10 years ago when Assassin's Creed was absolutely storming, when Siege was out and all that, and they were doing really, really well. Yeah, I think that they are so primed to be bought by, and I'm not even saying it's going to be like, it's going to be Sony or it's going to be like this big other massive industry. Like, they could just be bought by like a holding group or something like that, stripped down, flipped, and everyone loses their jobs, and all those rich wankers that are part of the holding group make a shit ton of money on it. Do you know what I mean? It can be a really horrible situation like that, and Ubisoft are suddenly a shadow of their former self. Do you know what I mean? And I really think that they are probably staring down the barrel of that right now. And I think that something like that, if they're getting a big payout relative to what their share price is right now, I think a lot of investors and a lot of shareholders will be really drawn in by that, frankly.
Yeah.
All right, let's finish off with a couple of shout outs before we get stuck into this Xbox Developer Direct. Sorry, I'm going to stumble over that, I think, every single time I say it. New format for Xbox. Shout out number one, though. Forspoken has come out this week, and the reviews are, I mean, they're pretty poor, let's be honest. Firstly, it has to be said that a lot of outlets did not get review codes for this game until very close to, if not after release, which is historically a pretty bad sign, I would say, Liz. Would you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
It is currently sitting with a 68 on Metacritic, which I think by everybody's expectations is a bit of a fail. But some of the reviews for this that I've read are quite weird. Like, no one seems to be saying that, this is a really bad game. And in fact, it seems to be relatively competently made. But it just seems to be boring and unoriginal and completely forgettable and just a wasted opportunity. Which is a real shame, because I think a lot of people, including myself, like, saw potential in this. You know what I mean? The combat looked really good, the movement looked really cool and all that in those like initial trailers. Like, once upon a time, I was excited to hear news about this game, but you can't hang your hat on fancy movement and combat for the whole game. Like, there has to be something of substance tying it all together, do you know what I mean? And it just seems as if this game just completely lacks anything interesting in that department whatsoever.
Yeah, it does seem to have got a bit of a panning, and for those reasons, I mean, it's good, I suppose, that it's not a broken, buggy mess, because that tends to be the thing that drags scores down this much at the moment. But yeah, by all accounts, just nothing much to it. You know, the writing's been taking a panning, and I think the thing is, this game has been surrounded by red flags for quite a long time. Only the latest of which was the, you know, major outlets not getting codes until release day in some cases. You know, that tells you that they don't want a certain narrative about the game coming out at the time when most people are going to buy it, and you can make your own inferences from that, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. And it just tells me as well that they don't have confidence
absolutely,
in the game. You know
yeah.
what I mean? They don't have confidence that game is going to go out and perform well with reviewers, you know? And that is a bad fucking sign when you can't back your own game.
Exactly.
Alright, let's shout out number 2. Fire Emblem Engage has also come out this week. Currently sitting with a pretty respectable 81 on Metacritic. It is down quite a bit, though, I have to say, from Fire Emblem Three Houses, the previous game, which got an 89. The game basically seems to be quite polarizing. I think that if you're into the history of the series and you know about a lot of the returning characters and whatever in the series, this will be probably like quite a good nostalgia trip, but I think otherwise it just generally failed to reach the highs of Three Houses. And to be honest with you, as someone who played Three Houses and played a lot of Three Houses, it's kind of amazing to me that despite liking that game so much, I had no interest in playing this whatsoever, and the marketing really just washed over me, and I just really never engaged with it at all, which is not a great sign considering I'm probably their target audience in the West. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So yeah, I think that the game's quite polarizing, but some people do seem to be really liking it. Like, I've seen even people on our Twitter talking about it in a really positive light, and people do seem to be getting some enjoyment out of it. I'm just not sure it's quite as good as Three Houses, which I think it is ultimately going to continue to be compared to, whether it deserves it or not, you know? Yeah,
there's no getting away from that shadow because it was such a well-received game. I would totally agree. It feels like this is just sort of quietly come out, really. It doesn't feel like there was a huge amount of fanfare beforehand, and it's not really killed it with reviews, but I'm sure there'll be plenty there for people who are into Fire Emblem, even people like yourself who, you know, I'm sure if you actually did play this, you would probably enjoy it just fine, you know?
I probably would, but I'm just like, it's just not...
Yeah, it's not made...
Catching
yeah, it's
the
not
eye,
made
you know,
the
so to
argument
speak.
to make you come and play it over anything else just now, and it's a very busy start to the year in terms of releases, so you need to stand out.
Absolutely, either. Alright, listen, final shout out number 3, and this is a sort of 2-for-1 and just bringing the depression train into the station here. Crystal Dynamics have said that they will no longer be supporting Marvel's Avengers after September the 30th this year. This after a final update on March the 31st, which basically means that almost exactly 3 years, or as close as it makes no difference, 3 years since the game came out, it is now not supported, which means it will die on the vine. And Lewis, Stadia is officially dead as well, which also comes about 3 years after it initially launched. Again, I think that Stadia was a great idea, horrendously executed. I really think that there is something in streaming games, not having an expensive console in your house, like the sort of cheap accessibility to games, as long as you have expensive, good internet, I suppose, but like just not having that box there, and I think that can be a barrier to a lot of people, and I think that there's something in this for what we would call a quote-unquote much more casual gamer, you know? But yeah, I just think that the Google Stadia model was a disaster from day one, frankly.
Terrible model, yeah. They really botched that from the first moment. And, I mean, everyone predicted that this day would come, and obviously we knew a wee while before now that it was going to be over, but that's it. Officially shut off. Google will need to think again if they really want to compete in this space, basically, you know, same with all the big tech companies, really. And yeah, it's a bit of a shame for Marvel's Avengers. Also not very surprising to think that they got 3 years out of that, actually, given how bad it was on release. It's not, you know, it didn't crash after a couple of weeks like Anthem did, so you've got to give it some plaudits for that.
Okay, well, if we're comparing it with Anthem, yes, it done brilliantly, yeah. But like they had 10-year timelines for this game, you know what I mean? Like this is a massive fail for them. I mean, speaking about Ubisoft, I think Square Enix are in a troubling way.
Well, that's Forspoken also bombed. That's another one on their list, you know. So
yeah, no, absolutely, as and Crystal Dynamics seem to be weirdly have been seconded into Xbox to help on the reboot of Perfect Dark as well, bizarrely. But yeah, very, very strange situation. It's always sad to hear about things dying, I just think. Like, just generally, like we were never Stadia truthers or anything like that. We never engaged with Marvel's Avengers, but it's never good to see these things die,
no,
you know?
Exactly, no.
All right, and on that very fucking depressing note, Lewis, I think it is time for a beer, and then we'll be back for Topic of the Week. And we are back for Topic of the Week. Our Topic of the Week this week, our extended Topic of the Week this week, Lewis, is a recap of the Xbox Developer Direct.
It is indeed, Mark. Yeah, so just finished sort of fresh right before we started recording tonight. This first edition, I guess, of what Xbox seem to have launched as a new platform for sharing games, this Developer Direct model, which I guess, yeah, we can talk a wee bit at the end about our thoughts on that more broadly. But we were told we were getting 4 games ahead of time here, and we got 5 games, so it's slightly more than expected, but just barely. So let's get stuck in. We'll go through the games first, and then we can talk about the show more broadly after that. First up, Mark, we got to see a little bit of Minecraft Legends, and more specifically, they were talking about the PvP multiplayer aspects of this game, which I have to admit, like, being not particularly a Minecraft person, I don't really know a great deal about Minecraft Legends. I haven't paid enough attention to what this game is, but what we saw I thought was interesting enough. I think if you're looking for this kind of like strategic co-op gameplay that they're showing there, and the kind of base building and tower defense kind of aspects, I think there's probably quite a lot there, but just naturally because of the tools that Minecraft offers. But what was your takeaway from this?
I thought for what it was, actually, it looked pretty cool. Do you know what it was? I'm not a Minecraft person, Lewis. I know you're not a Minecraft person. I'm not really a PvP person either in general. This wasn't doing anything for me, but I think that the concept and the idea is good. To be honest with you, I mean, Microsoft have owned Mojang and Minecraft for ages now. Do you know what I mean? And I was just sort of saying to you during the presentation itself, like, it surprises me that it's taken them so long to do something like this with that IP. Do you know what I mean? Whenever it was that they bought Mojang, it was the hottest shit in the world. Do you know what I mean? Like, you couldn't turn around for fucking another Minecraft thing. Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't know. I just thought they would have done more with that IP before now, but I'm glad that they are doing something with it. I think that this is cool. We are obviously not the audience for this list, but I mean, I think that particularly on Game Pass, this could find a niche, you know?
Oh, definitely, absolutely there. And yeah, maybe this is, I mean, they had Minecraft Dungeons, I think it was called, not too long ago now.
Sure, yeah.
So maybe they are now
this
starting
seems
to
like
expand
a totally
out.
different level of game to that, though, you know?
Yeah, potentially, yeah. But maybe just a sign that they are going to be a bit more active with this brand now, and yeah, see all the directions they can push it in, because it is obviously naturally very flexible. And we got a release date, which is April 18th, so coming in just a few months' time for people. Next up, we got a decent look at Forza Motorsport. No number, so they have ditched the numbering system, it seems, unless they're just being coy about it.
It's the 8th one, though. We all know it's the 8th
one. So, I mean, what to say about this, really? I mean, this is a gorgeous-looking racing game, basically. I don't think, as a franchise, it's half as interesting as the Forza Horizon series is, but that's personal taste. You know, if you're into proper sim racing games, this is probably more in that sort of avenue for you. Gorgeous, no doubt about that, and we got extreme detail about the visual and audio wizardry. I mean, down to like the being able to hear the car suspension better, which I don't think is especially needed or useful, but there you go. If you're a car suspension sound guy, this is the game for you.
Do you know what it is? Like, do you know what I see about these games? Like, obviously, when they are marketing these games, which is exactly what this was, they lean heavy on the technology and how real they can make the cars look, and how real they can make the handling feel, and how, like, they were even talking about the track like dynamically heats up depending on where the cars are driving, and therefore that like changes your grip and all that, and like all that. That's all really, really cool. And I think that, look, does any of that particularly interest me? Absolutely not. However, I think that if you're going down the sim alley, do you know what I mean? If you're literally trying to simulate what it's like to be a race car driver, do you know what I mean? I think that the people that are into that appreciate this stuff, you know? And I thought they'd done a fine job here. Again, it's just not a game I'm massively vibing with.
Yeah, to be clear, I'm not even being dismissive of it, really. It's just, like you say, there is only kind of one way to show this off. It's exactly the same whenever we see Gran Turismo. You know, it's all about the visuals and the dynamic weather and all that kind of stuff. So, you know, those are the things they have to lean on, because you can't get too into the weeds on the driving mechanics after a while. But what I do think it means is that it will be difficult for a game like this to really pull in new players. If you're into cars already, this is going to be on your radar, and you've probably just decided which franchise is your go-to driving franchise. But if you're not particularly, like, I think Horizon could pull more people in. I certainly would be. I just said, like, I streamed a little bit of Horizon 4 when I got my Xbox. I would be, you know, more than up for having a night playing Forza Horizon 5, the Mexico one that's, you know, fairly recently out. All of that looks like loads of fun, so I can totally imagine jumping into it. But this one, I'm just like, yep, looks amazing. Great. It's good that it exists for people, but I find it really hard to warm to, particularly, you know.
I mean, to be honest with you, I think that's a good way to put it. I struggle to warm to games like this. I think that's fair.
Next up then was the one surprise that we got here. So we had been told that we were getting Forza and Minecraft and the 2 games to come, which I won't mention just now if this is in some way a surprise to people, I suppose. But what we did get sandwiched in here was a game that had just about leaked. Certainly the name had come out. There was a bit of knowledge that this might be in this showcase tonight, and that is a new game from Tango Gameworks, the team behind Ghostwire Tokyo from... Was that just last year? I think it was just last year, wasn't it?
Indeed, I believe it was, yeah. And it should be pointed out as well that this, while it did leak, was fresh to me and Lewis. We didn't know this was coming.
And hadn't heard anything about it, really. This is also the team behind the Evil Within games, which they sort of mentioned within this trailer, because this game, which is named Hi-Fi Rush, is completely different in style and tone from what we are used to from Tango Gameworks and Shinji Mikami. And they actually, again, kind of laboured that in the point. So the one thing I mentioned about the structure, I guess, of this whole showcase was that all the games were discussed by the developers themselves. It wasn't like a floating head voice the way you get in a Switch Direct or any of those types of things. So we actually got the directors of the game here talking about it, and it did feel like Shinji Mikami was at pains to point out that this was someone else's idea and not necessarily his idea for the game. But this was a sort of cel-shaded, sort of cartoony anime. I thought it looked like a brawler at first. They came on to say it was like a rhythm action game, essentially an action game where the entire game is set to a beat, and a bit like games that we were mentioning actually as we watched it, like Metal Hellslinger or Curse of the Necrodancer? I always forget what that game's actually called.
Crypt of the Necrodancer.
Crypt of the Necrodancer, yeah, that's right, yeah. And the kind of Zelda edition of that came out as well. Like those games, it's about attacking on the beat and trying to build a rhythm to your attacks so that, you know, you get stronger, you pull off better combos or whatever it might be.
And it was also doing that, like making your own soundtrack as you hit enemies, similar to Ape Out that we played ages and ages ago as a PlayAlong game.
Exactly, yeah. And so I guess this is a game where if you're interested in the style, particularly, if that captures you, I've got to say the sense of humour that we got in the trailer was not working for me.
Oh, heavens no.
It had a bit of a style that has been quite widely criticised recently, the kind of vibe that Forspoken's writing gives in places, that sort of, look at all these zany things that I'm doing and that are happening to me, which, you know, I think games need to move away. We all accept that we're not in the normal world when we're playing these things, you know. But I don't know, overall, I wouldn't shit on this, I wouldn't hate on it, because I can kind of see that it's got a few interesting actual gameplay ideas within it. They don't look like they've been executed in the best way necessarily to me, and certainly the kind of style and the story and that doesn't look like the kind of thing I would naturally gravitate towards, but I can totally see this hitting an audience. I don't have any issue with it being particularly what we get here was a surprise within the showcase, but also a surprise release.
Yeah, exactly. This be shadow dropping during the show. I mean, I thought that was quite cool. That was a quite nice way to advertise this, because I think if they showed this off and they were like, oh, it's coming next year at some point, well, we would all have been a bit like, oh, well, who cares? But just because we all got to see it now, then it's dropping now. It's obviously on Game Pass now. We can all go and play it now. I think that was quite a good way to do it for this sort of style and size of game, which is obviously a smaller title. You know what I mean? Yeah, I mean, Lewis, I've got to be honest, it didn't do much for me. I didn't like the writing. I didn't like the vibes it was giving off. It was giving me a sort of like No More Heroes vibe in general, which is also something that I just don't respond well to. I don't know. But look, I would suggest that you go and look it up. It does have a pretty distinctive style. I do quite like the style. I just don't like what they're doing with the style, I suppose. And this sort of rhythmic style of gameplay is not something I'm into when it's that prescriptive. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, we'll talk about the fact that like Doom is really rhythmic, and it is, but it's not like set to a beat. It's not like them telling you the rhythm. You decide your own rhythm sort of thing.
Yeah, exactly.
So
yeah.
it is a different thing, but it's interesting. It's an interesting concept for a game. I hope that it does well, and I think that it can do well on Game Pass. And I think that Game Pass is good for this sort of stuff. Do you know what I mean? You can shoot a lot of stuff at the wall and see what sticks. You know what I mean? And I like that Game Pass can be used as a platform for things like this, even if this isn't one of the things that is interesting to me, you know?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Very similar to Pentiment coming out at the end of the year. Sort of
exactly.
Would
Yes,
that
exactly
would that
like
game
that.
exist in the way that it does without this platform to kind of hopefully permit kind of experimentation? So yeah, I think that's all great. And I suppose go and check it out, but also keep an eye out for the discussion around it over the next few days, because you'll undoubtedly start to get reviews and bits and pieces written about this game now that it's kind of playable for everyone. And you know, who knows, maybe in a few days time we'll be hearing that it's actually really good. But it's also one thing to say about it was that they kept talking about how geared towards fun it was rather than it being overly difficult, and the typical like, you can, a bit like Devil May Cry actually, you know, if you play it better you'll get even better kind of rewards and better scores for what you're doing.
Yeah, it had like an arcadey like scoring system,
exactly,
like things
yeah.
like DMC and Bayonetta and things like that. Like, you'll get a grade for how well you done it.
Yeah, so it definitely
Very
feels like
arcadey.
it's been built to kind of onboard people, which again works really well for Game Pass. You know, they're going to bank on a lot of people watching that show tonight and thinking, well, we'll go and check it out. It's easy to play, and so you sink a good few hours into it.
Definitely that, yeah.
Something else that they showed that you'd certainly be sinking a lot of hours into if you got involved in it was the Elder Scrolls Online, Mark, and specifically what they were showcasing tonight was, I guess, this new chapter, the latest addition to the game called Necrom, where they've introduced a new class of sort of dark magic wielders that I think have never been playable in the game before, so that I guess that's going to be the big hook. This is coming in June. I think actually it said June the 5th on PC and June 20th on console. Might be the other way around, but so if you're into your Elder Scrolls, that's when you can look out for that. What they actually showed us specifically to this chapter, I have very little idea. If that presentation to me felt more like just an advert for Elder Scrolls Online overall. You know, they talked a lot about just the huge variety of activities essentially within that game, which was sort of disappointing in a way, because I think we were both watching it thinking there's something quite cool about Elder Scrolls Online, really, and like, you know, I've played Skyrim and enjoyed it, but then it was showing you how, you know, you can spend your time just fishing or building or, you know, tending the farm, and that's just when any game like this starts to feel to me like a chore or a job or a second life that I just don't really want to get invested into.
Yeah, it was when they were talking about, oh, this is how you can decorate the interior of your virtual home, and I was like, nah,
just
don't
give
do
me
that.
one.
want to slay dragons and shit. I can decorate. Well, actually, I was going to say I can decorate my own room, but I can't even be bothered doing that, let alone doing a fucking virtual one. No, don't get me wrong. Like, these style of games are not for me. However, if you are into this style of game, I think the Elder Scrolls Online looks pretty cool. Yeah. It's really well supported. Like, they talk about the fact that they do these new chapters every single year. This is apparently quite a big update because you're getting this new class of character that you can play, which I think he said was only the third new class since they launched. So, which seems to be quite a rarity. So that's quite cool. Maybe this will pull more people in. Obviously, again, it's on Game Pass now, which will just make it available to so many more people. Yeah, it's cool for what it is. You know what I mean? Yeah. I think that Elder Scrolls in general is a good world to do something like this with. You know what I mean? I know that the Elder Scrolls Online got off to a bit of a rocky start, but it is one of these ones that does seem to have turned the corner a bit. It's well supported. It all looked cool. It all looked good enough for what it was. You know what I mean? However, I do sort of struggle to get excited about games like this, if I'm totally honest.
I mean, definitely it's the kind of thing that you might feel has left you miles behind already now. And they did, to their credit, say that they were making all of the previous expansions available for free for a little while at least. I don't think they actually said what the dates were for it, but so it does mean if it's the kind of thing that you might be interested in jumping into, you can and kind of get a great experience of it before this new update drops in the summer. So yeah, it's there. It's going to bring people in for sure, but not for us necessarily. And Mark, the last game, the big one, I guess, that most people were kind of watching this show for, Arcane's new sort of hero shooter, I guess, story-driven shooter. They described it as Redfall, which we've been kind of waiting to see properly again for a wee while now. Overall thoughts on this before we kind of dive in and out of it?
Once again, and I feel as though I'm beating the same drum here, it's not a game for me, right? Which doesn't mean it's a bad game, to be clear. Like, this distinction has to be made. I think that this is an interesting, albeit not original, idea for a sort of co-op shooter. Do you know what I mean? The bad guys are vampires, so that's quite cool. And you get Arcane's sort of spin on that. Do you know what I mean? It looks and feels very Arcane. Their approach to doing different missions, you can do them in a variety of different ways. You get a whole different skill set depending on what characters you are, and each mission can be accomplished very differently, it seems, depending on who you are and how you choose to approach things. I think all that's quite cool. This adds another dimension on top of that as well, obviously, where you can play with your friends and whatever, and you can like squad up and take on this stuff. Again, for what it is, it looks fine. It's just not something for me, and it's not something that I particularly get excited about, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I would broadly kind of go along with that. To me, I was always a wee bit nervous about Redfall from when we first saw it, because it's really not my style game. I mean, just FPSs generally, but then there's quite a lot else about it that doesn't naturally gel with me. But I thought this showing of it, I was more impressed and kind of more interested in it than I felt like I had been before. So that's a good sign.
It seems good. It seems good for what it is. Like, it definitely does. I think that a lot of people, again, particularly because it's on Game Pass, will give this a go, and I think that when it comes out, you'll see a huge spike in Game Pass numbers and stuff like that. Like, I think that at least in the beginning, a lot of people will try this out just because of the studio, just because it's an Xbox game as well. Yeah, I think that this will be popular when it comes out, and I think that they showed it off like pretty well here. Like, I think it looked like an Arcane shooter, you know? Yeah,
I mean, I think that's my main takeaway from it, absolutely, is that if you are into Arcane style game, that those kind of branching optional ways to approach missions and how everything kind of iterates on itself and your actions actually matter, which I mean, I really, really like Arcane, even though I've not played a lot of their games. I like what they're about, I like what they're trying to do, and introducing that into this kind of shooter space, I think is good, and will definitely capture some attention. It feels to me like what they've gone out to make is just the Arcane game, but as a sort of an ongoing sandbox where they'll just add more missions and you'll flesh out this territory
I think that's exactly
of Redfall.
What they've done. Yeah, I think that was the pitch, probably.
Yeah, and that makes loads of sense, and because that probably allow them to experiment with their own mechanics and try out different things going forward as well that could then find themselves in Deathloop 2 or whatever else might be coming down the line, you know. So I mean, I'm intrigued by this. They finally put a date on it. We're getting this on May the 2nd, and so when that comes around and it is on Game Pass, I could see myself giving it a try at some point, same as I wanted to with Deathloop and never quite clicked with that really either. But yeah, I think Arcane are a studio worth watching anyway, and if you've got a Game Pass, why not jump in and try it for a wee bit?
Yeah, definitely, I get that. And again, another hard day. And just to sort of move us on to talking about the showcase itself, I think that Xbox have done just enough with this showcase to keep us all ticking along, which is basically, I think that they had to give us hard dates for early this year and what they are doing early this year, because last year was, quite frankly, a disaster for them in terms of the games that they released, which was none. And I think that a lot of people, well, I don't know, reading Twitter, you would be fooled otherwise perhaps, but I think that a lot of people were sort of like, well, what the fuck, where's all the games for this fancy dancy, all the teraflops console that you just sold me, do you know what I mean? And they've put hard dates on everything here apart from Forza,
right? Yeah,
like,
just said 2023, yeah.
Yeah, which, I mean, I'm a little disappointed in that even, but yeah, and we're obviously getting a separate Starfield thing relatively soon. It sounds like the way that they were sort of talking when this was announced, the first thing that they said just about was Starfield's not going to be there, but we'll do another thing soon. Do you know what I mean? Like, they were just trying to get out in front of that, I think.
Yeah.
So Obviously, whatever comes out of that will be interesting. Again, I think basically they have to put a date on that if they're going to talk about it again at this point. And if that's coming in the first half of the year, hopefully the first quarter of the year, if it is coming relatively soon, that would be great. But I don't know, like, how do you feel about Xbox after this presentation?
I mean, I don't think my thoughts have changed any, because ultimately, I wasn't expecting a great deal more from this than what we got. They kind of delivered what they said they were going to give us. See if they committed right now, if they put out a statement after this going like, thanks for joining us for that, we're going to be doing one of these developer directs every quarter, focusing on a couple of upcoming games, I would feel like this is a format that works. I would feel like we would never need to get overhyped in future, and that we wouldn't have to, we could still expect like separate events for things like Starfield. But Xbox is always, or for the foreseeable future at least, is always going to have this problem where the weight of all the things that they haven't talked about yet or haven't shown off, having already announced them, that's always going to outweigh most of what they show, because none of these games, maybe I think other than Redfall, are like world beaters. They're never going to be those dominant top of every news site, the Twitter conversation type games. And so everyone is immediately going to be going, well, yeah, but when is the next one of those? Where is this company's God of War or it's Spider-Man or whatever that's going to ignite the conversation and demand that people buy the console?
Well, that's Starfield, right?
It is Starfield. It's supposed to be Starfield.
I don't know, I just feel as though there's a lot riding on that being a very good game.
Yeah, there's everything.
I'm not saying
that
it can't be that. I mean, certainly not. But I'm just saying, if it's not, I don't know what to think about Xbox in the next coming years, because they've sort of failed to deliver big IP for quite a while now. Yeah. And this would be the first properly big thing that Bethesda made since the acquisition. Do you know what I mean? I mean, fair enough, they've put out Deathloop and Ghostwire, but I think by their standards they're relatively small games. Do you know what I mean? And on the wrong fucking platform. Yeah. But like, in terms of like big Bethesda RPG, do you know what I mean? This is the one. Do you know what I mean? And I think that it just feels as though there's a lot riding on that.
Yeah, there's so much riding on that, and particularly, they might well be able to kind of say, well, Starfield technically was started before the acquisition and all that. So I still think we should look ahead to the next slate. It's when we see Perfect Dark and Fable and Avowed and Hellblade 2 and all these things that are very directly connected. Some of them I'm sure will have started as projects before the acquisitions, but some of them are also internal Xbox studios already. So it's when that slate hits that I think it really counts. But if Starfield doesn't do the business, the cloud is going to be so massive that it again might just overshadow everything that they're trying to do, because you'd be looking at that's both Halo and Bethesda struggled if that were to happen. But we don't really need to think like that yet. I still think Starfield is back half of the year. I think that they might be safer doing that if it's not quite perfect yet as well. But I hope for everyone who wants to play its sake that we get some kind of event in the next few weeks and that game comes out in March or April, or maybe in the summer, just to keep it away from Redfall.
Yeah, my bet is still first half. We're holding on hope for first half list. And to be clear, like I know I've probably feel as though I've come down very negatively on that showcase, but it was just I just happened to be a bunch of games I wasn't particularly interested in. I actually don't. I think it was fine. I think they basically did what they had to do. It was fine. Yeah. And then the Starfield front as well. Like, I want to play Starfield. Like, I want Starfield to be good. To be 100% transparent about that, but I don't know. There just feels like there's a lot of weight on those shoulders now.
Yeah, absolutely.
A lot of weight. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I think we'll have to call it a day there. I'd like to remind everyone that you can find PlayersToo on all the social media. That is Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, the lot. You can also find our written content over at PlayersToo.com. That's PLAYERSTOO.com. And if you could take 5 seconds to give us 5 stars over on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts, that really, really, really helps us out. It does a huge amount for the exposure of the show. And while you're over there, if you could leave us a little review as well, again, that just helps us out even more. And thank you so much to anyone that's already done that for us. You're an absolute legend to us. I would like to remind everyone that our play-along game for this month is Norco, which me and Lewis have both started on Game Pass.
Yeah.
Tying it all back to Xbox again.
Yeah, my first Series X game, pretty much diving into Norco. I've played about half of it, so I've got just the kind of back half to go.
What
now.
An incredible game to start on the world's most powerful console. A point-and-click adventure game with low-res pixelated graphics.
Yeah, absolutely. No action. No movement, perfect. All those teraflops in action.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we will see you next week.
Thanks.